Alrighty, what is up guys, Evanaldo here. So welcome back to the channel. A little bit of a, boring kind of summer market. We do see, that boringness a lot in the summer. And I mean, the first thing here is we've been in this range with a couple like tiny little breakouts, but generally been in this range since May 8th. And you're going about 2 months. I think there was one time where we were in a really sideways, phase, and I did some did some history looking at these charts, looked at some history in these charts, and generally I think the most I ever saw where Bitcoin, just stayed really sideways, stayed boring, was for 2.5 months. So that would give us, I guess you could argue, end of July at the absolute most, mid-July at the absolute most, something like that, before, a potential breakout. And that breakout's probably either going to be upward or downward. Now, when you look at higher time frames, your monthly looked really good. You had the green, green dot, and that kind of brought us up. You could argue now that it's confirmed, it's kind of played out, that's over. However, I would argue that we're more in the bullish case because, you got your green dot in the weekly, and that looks like it should be able to jump upward. And that breakout, like I said, should be within 2 weeks. I mean, I'd be surprised if it takes any longer than that. I would think that you can do something like this, and I would guess that you could consider Iran. You could consider that to be kind of our delay and all that. And now that that's kind of over, that you can break upward. We got the big beautiful bill BBB. The Lions trying to work on getting that. If we can get that, I don't know when the timeline is on that. What do you guys think? Nobody knows, obviously, but a couple weeks, maybe they pass that. Maybe that's good. That brings us up, a little bit more tax, more money printing, a little bit more tax breaks, not too much more than what we saw in, 2017 or whatever, but more money printing or whatever, And then you bring that upward, and that could be our peak, 120 in July, and then August is your summer lull into potential, rate cuts in September there, and that would be probably your end of QT and would lead to a nice little altcoin season in the last 3 months. Now, if we look at more short term, you may play a little bit of ping pong, a little bit more, come back down to these areas, 102. I mean, how would you trade this? Trigger wave right here in the daily. You could try, something of this nature. You could definitely try something of this nature. That's a 101, not the best risk reward ratio, and I don't think you would lose these areas. So trading right now, and I think, a lot of people, I think CryptoFace mentioned it. I don't want to put words in nobody's mouth, but I think he mentioned this time of year is tough for trading, especially as you approach the 4th of July. So, I mean, I'm in, I locked in profits on this ETH long here. I know it's a tiny little position for me. I should have doubled that at least, but it is what it is. I'm being a little bit cautious, waiting for the things to kind of come, waiting for things to kind of come. And, that's kind of what I'm looking at right here. And I do think maybe a little bit lower than a nice bounce, and then you should be, able to continue forward. I think last year, or was it the year before? I'm trying to remember. We saw a bottom right around 4th of July, and then we went up a bit from there. So expect some volatility. Definitely expect some volatility here. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of a boring situation, unfortunately. But I do think within 2 weeks, you should break upward. And this is the time of year, like I mentioned, that lower trading volume, that boring time of year where these things tend to happen. So it is what it is. On regular candles, we have confirmed the trigger wave on the monthly. I mean, this is one of those rare bearish signs that usually, I mean, I guess if you think it's going to be like 2019, you roll over there. But, usually, in all likelihood, should, bring things forward. And I just want to compare this a little bit to what happened in November of 23. I would do it from that low. So that's the case definitely for a new all-time high by hopefully October. So maybe you get that October all-time high, and then you jump a little bit higher to 7,000 or something around that area, big fib level by the end of the year or January or something of that nature. So that's what I'm kind of looking at on Ethereum for the macro. And when you look here, nice trigger wave on the 2-day. I think it may take some time, but I think it should play out. I mean, you definitely could come back to 2,100. It wouldn't surprise me. Shout out to Mitch Ray. I think he posted something on Twitter about that. He was talking about coming down back to 2,100, I think. Yeah, I mean, objectively, it does look pretty likely here, but I don't think that. Yeah, I'm just curious if you were to kind of do that, maybe your 4th of July little dump, and then continuing forward, something like that. But it's a hard time to kind of. It ain't the easiest time to trade, I'll tell you that much. I mean, the obvious trade here would be kind of like that. And this would probably be a good idea to kind of hedge the bet for me a little bit, but you got that trigger wave forming right there. Like it's a weird time. I don't know if it's gonna come down quite that low. I think you may be choppy and fighting both sides for a little bit, but yeah, I mean, trigger wave forming ETH versus Bitcoin. I think this should have bottomed. If it hasn't, I would guess double bottom there, but I think you should be able to keep going up well. Your monthly, that was May, but still, I mean, money flow coming up on all these. If you believe in ETH, this should have bottomed. Dixie, people are talking about Dixie kind of, factoring in kind of the rate cuts into the end of the year. So you may get a jump pretty soon here. I am not the biggest fan of the Dixie lately. It's been too boring. It's kind of, now it's finally breaking downward. It's been downward. I think it should, I don't know, be sideways to more downward. I don't think it tells us much in terms of where crypto is going to go. I don't think it tells us too much. I guess you could argue that it makes the Fed more hawkish the more this goes down, but not necessarily. So, yeah. I do think inflation's low enough. I do think that we're not going to see that much of an inflation scare anytime yet. Maybe a little bit in 26. Maybe that may be more the reason why you do see your typical, kind of bear market in 26, at least for Bitcoin. You see, kind of a decent correction there. But as of right now, I don't think you're going to see much more inflation scares this year. Just a few other coins. I think, it's taking its time, but I think Cardano should be able to hold that 51 cent area, maybe some wicks down below, but should be able to generally hold that area. And then hopefully you may see, once we finally break upward, a nice, you're kind of coiling up the spring here. I mean, you just, you've been in the range since November. It's not going to be in this range forever. It's eventually going to jump upward or downward, and I think upward. Solana's looking really good right now, that weekly right there, rejecting from this point. So, that would be, I feel like you probably would hold 141, but, be careful with it, especially like I mentioned, especially for all the reasons that I mentioned. But yeah, trying to trade this, swing trade this upward may not be a terrible idea here. Curious what the funding rate on Solana is right now. I wonder if a lot of people are going along on it, but yeah, you could almost get a 3-to-1 there. I'd maybe be a little bit more lenient to a 2-to-1, but yeah. I don't know, ApeCoin. I mean, generally a lot of these things look like they could keep going forward. And this is interesting here. New all-time high for the Nasdaq. Maybe you do reject from this point. Now this is more your bearish case. If this does reject, and this July ends up being your summer low month, then you'll see probably crypto, come down as well. I don't think terribly low, but and then into end of year and all that, then you get up to these higher points. So entirely possible. It's going to be one of those two things. Either that, what I just drew, or the old thing I had. Either continue forward, then have that drop. So probably one of those two things. Altcoins right now, I think it's ETH season. I think ETH is going to outperform most alts, for the next few months, probably until September. Others versus Bitcoin, I don't know if you're quite there yet. You're close, though. I feel like you're close. You're within a few months. You know what I mean? Like September would be my guess, 2-3 months for a potential bottom and continuing forward to finally see an altcoin season in season 4. Quarter 4. But yeah, jumping right there. Others, I know Pentoshi was posting about others being pretty good. I think we just got to see, I think it was, what did you say, Jubilant July? I hope so. I think we could hold these areas. I think there's a good shot. I would still be leaning towards the bullish case, but, let's see coming into the 4th of July. Like, maybe it may, here's what happens a lot of times. Like, it comes down and everyone thinks it's like breaking downward into the holiday or whatever. And then, what I mean? It just comes, you get that volatility and it just coils up because it's been so boring, and then you finally get that volatility. But yeah. So if you guys are interested in some of these trades, some of these things that I mentioned, check out the link down below, the pinned comment for BloFin and BYDFI. You get 10% off your fees for life with both of those exchanges right there. This one is straight over, over on BYDFI right here, and then the funding fee, not too bad right there. I wanted to show you guys quickly here. So obviously, I think this way is September rate cut may help us out for an altcoin season, and then fear and greed, coin market cap fear and greed would kind of, I'm just curious if we're at like an area where, so we're at very neutral right here, and then it kind of is almost like this area a little bit. You had your choppy summer, and then you jumped up into the end of the year, which I think you may see something like that. You could also argue we're kind of like right here. That was about another month of bullishness. So I kind of think, I would kind of think one more month of bullishness, bullish July, and then like red August, a little bit of fear, and then into the end of the year, kind of something like that. But obviously a little bit tough to say at the moment. So anyway, guys, if you're interested in trading, check out BidFi, check out BloFin. Links down below. If you deposit, you get 10% off your fees for life with my link. No KYC, no VPN. If you deposit at least $100 on either of those, remember to open a support ticket in the Discord, which is down link down below as well. With your UID or your email, and we'll give you one free month in Discord. A lot of really good stuff in there. So check it out if you guys are interested. Have a good one, guys. Goodbye.